Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is February 26th. On this day in 2012, George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer, shot and killed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. Today, we're revisiting the case that sparked a nationwide conversation about race, self-defense laws, and justice. Trayvon's story is more than just a legal case. It became a catalyst for social movements and a symbol of the fight for racial equality. In this episode, we'll explore who Trayvon was, the events that led to his death, the trial that followed, and the impact that his case has had on both the legal system and the broader conversation about race in America. Let's get started. Trayvon Benjamin Martin was born on February 5th, 1995 in Miami, Florida, to Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. Those who knew him remember him as a kind-hearted, funny, and curious teenager who loved football, spending time with friends, and helping others. He was especially passionate about space and aviation and dreamt of becoming a pilot. Trayvon attended Dr. Michael M. Kropp High School in Miami, where he played football and enjoyed hanging out with his friends and teammates. He was known as someone who was a little on the quiet side, and he loved listening to music, especially R&B. He was one of those kids who was always walking around with his headphones on. His friend and teammate, Daryl Green, described him as a positive person and a good friend. Trayvon volunteered both at the field where he had been playing football since he was 5 and at the aviation program that he had attended. He was a hardworking, responsible teenager who admittedly did occasionally get into some minor trouble, but absolutely had a good head on his shoulders. February 26, 2012 was a rainy Sunday evening in Sanford, Florida, where Trayvon was visiting his father's fiancée in the retreat at Twin Lakes, a gated community. Around 7 p.m., Trayvon left the house to walk to a nearby convenience store where he bought a can of Arizona iced tea and a bag of Skittles. Simple snacks for a night in. As he made his way back to the house, George Zimmerman, a 28-year-old neighborhood watch volunteer, noticed Trayvon and called the police to report what he described as a suspicious person. Despite being advised by the dispatcher not to pursue Trayvon, Zimmerman didn't listen. Instead, he took it upon himself to get out of his vehicle and followed the teenager on foot. No one knows exactly what words were exchanged when Zimmerman and Trayvon confronted each other. What is known is that within minutes, Trayvon had been shot in the chest. By the time police arrived, Trayvon was lying on the ground, unresponsive. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Zimmerman told police that he had acted in self-defense, citing Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which allows individuals to use deadly force if they believe they are in imminent danger. After a brief detention, Zimmerman was released without charges, a decision that would soon ignite a firestorm of public outrage. News of Trayvon's death spread quickly, sparking protests and vigils across the country. People of all backgrounds took to the streets to demand justice for Trayvon. His face became a symbol of racial injustice, and the hoodie he had been wearing when he was shot became a powerful statement of solidarity. Under mounting pressure, Florida Governor Rick Scott appointed a special prosecutor, Angela Corey, to re-examine the case. On April 11, 2012, Zimmerman was charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. George Zimmerman's trial began in June 2013 and drew intense media coverage. The prosecution argued that Zimmerman had profiled and pursued Trayvon without cause, which led to a confrontation that ended in unnecessary violence. They painted a picture of a teenager who was simply trying to walk home when he was confronted by an armed adult, a stranger at that. The defense, however, portrayed Zimmerman as a concerned citizen who had been attacked and acted in self-defense. They pointed to Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which allowed Zimmerman to use deadly force if he believed his life was in danger. The courtroom was tense as both sides presented their evidence. Trayvon's parents sat stoically through the proceedings, determined to see justice for their son. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered with signs bearing Trayvon's name, while others debated the implication of the case on television and on social media. After 16 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict on July 13th, 2013. Not guilty. Zimmerman was acquitted of all charges. The verdict was met with both grief and outrage. Across the United States, people took to the streets in protest, demanding justice not only for Trayvon, but for all victims of racial violence. The case became a catalyst for the Black Lives Matter movement, which continues to advocate for racial equality and an end to police brutality. Trayvon's parents, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, turned their grief into action. They founded the Trayvon Martin Foundation, which is dedicated to supporting families affected by gun violence and advocating for social justice. Their book, Rest in Power: The Enduring Life of Trayvon Martin, offers a heartfelt look at their son's life and the movement that was sparked by his death. In the years following his acquittal, George Zimmerman has remained a controversial figure. He has had several run-ins with the law, including domestic disputes and allegations of assault, though charges were often dropped. In 2016, he drew widespread criticism for attempting to auction the firearm he used to shoot Trayvon, describing it as, quote, a piece of American history, end quote. Zimmerman's actions have kept his name in the headlines, but his acquittal is a painful reminder of the racial inequalities that persist in the American justice system. More than a decade after his death, Trayvon Martin's legacy continues to resonate. His name is often mentioned alongside other victims of racial violence, including Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, and George Floyd. Each of these tragedies has fueled the fight for racial equality and police reform, leading to changes in laws, policies, and public awareness. Trayvon's story also inspired a new generation of activists. From high school students to professional athletes, people across the country have used their voices to advocate for justice, often chanting, "I am Trayvon Martin," a reminder that his story could have been anyone's. The death of Trayvon Martin is a heartbreaking tragedy that never should have happened. He should be 30 right now. He should be a pilot or whatever else he decided he wanted to be. As we reflect on his story, let us honor Trayvon's memory by continuing to work toward a world where every life is valued and every person is treated with dignity and respect. Except for George Zimmerman, you're a piece of shit, and I hope you have the life you deserve. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!